Good afternoon. My name is Casey Keene. I'm Director of Programs and Prevention here at the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. We are so thrilled that you have decided to join us today, and welcome to this webinar session titled Crank Up Your Youth Community Action Teams, What's Working in Florida. The FCADV is pleased to offer this webinar as part of our Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month initiative as a collaborative effort of our Domestic Violence Awareness Project and our Prevent IPV project. This February, we're putting a spotlight on youth activism as essential to an effective movement to end gender-based violence. Youth activism has propelled social justice movements throughout history, and today we are seeing youth taking on more issues than ever, employing a variety of creative strategies to accomplish real change. Our intention to embrace intergenerational approaches to our movement work will really help us to create the social change that we hope to realize. Today's webinar will examine the domestic violence prevention work of the Youth Community Action Team in Dade City, Florida, and the Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence Statewide Youth Summit, and FCADV Statewide Youth Leadership Programs. FCADV will provide examples of how prevention programs can increase youth leadership and engagement. In fact, as you see here on your screen, FCADV's Youth Activist Prevention Toolkit is featured as our Teen DV Month Tool of the Week on preventipv.org. So we encourage you to go to that website, preventipv.org, check out that tool and the variety of other prevention tools that we have available in our tools inventory. So before we begin, we do have a few questions to get a better sense of who's participating today. So I'd like to start out with a raise your hand question. And if you look at the top left corner of your presentation window, you'll see the call-in number, and next to that you'll see a hand, and that's our hand raising function. So I would encourage you to raise your hand if you are already working with youth. Great, so it looks like nearly half of our participants today are already doing work with youth. Thanks so much for your responses. Question 2, so we've got only 3 questions to ask you before we get started. And this one is a multiple choice question. So hopefully you can see the feedback poll on the left side of your screen under the list of participants for today's session. We'd like you to answer the question, what age groups are you working with? So A, middle school, B, high school, C, both, or D, other. And if it is other, we'd encourage you to chat that in the public chat. And you can see the pie chart changing to reflect people's selections. It looks like most are working with both age groups, both middle and high school. In fact, right now it looks like it's about 75%. And we've got a larger chunk working with high school students. We can see that one is at 13% there. Now we're going to go ahead and ask our third question of participants. Is your program in school or non-school related? So your program or your youth organization, are you working inside schools or outside of schools? Go ahead and respond. You see that responses are coming in. It looks like most, so about 2/3 are working with youth in school, or their programs are school-based. Okay, maybe even closer to half and half. Great, thank you so much. It's really helpful to get a sense. And Morgan chatted that she's doing both in her program, so that's wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, so now we're going to get into it with our presenters. We're so excited to have 3 amazing presenters with us today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, and then I'm going to pass the floor over to them. So Emil Rudicell is the Prevention and Youth Engagement Specialist at the Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Justine, would you, oh, we don't have the picture for Emil. They have been a community organizer and activist in a broad range of overlapping movements and have worked in direct service, providing crisis intervention and peer counseling since 2000. Prior to doing youth work with FCADV, Emil led conflict resolution groups with middle school age youth and helped with a youth-led community organizing project for reproductive justice in Washington, D.C. Rosa James, our next presenter, received her BS in Legal Studies and a Master's in Social Work from the University of Central Florida. Rosa started her career in social services as a child protective investigator with the Florida Department of Children and Families in 2005. In 2012, Rosa was hired as the Domestic Violence Prevention Coordinator for Harbor House of Central Florida. Currently, Rosa is the Prevention and Social Change Initiatives Coordinator for the Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence and implements the Delta Focus Project, a prevention program funded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Rosa had extensive violence prevention training and works with youth in her local community. We also have Terri O'Brien joining us, who's been the Director of Educational Services for Sunrise Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Center since 1989. She's a community organizer, instructor, and leader in the field of domestic and sexual violence and crisis intervention. Terri provides training on intimate partner violence for healthcare, school personnel, mental health clinicians, law enforcement, and other government agencies. She has presented at numerous state and national conferences. Terri is the chair and founder of the Pasco County Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team and has received the FCADV Advocate of the Year Award in 1991. So I'm very thrilled to have our presenters with us today, and Emil, you now have the floor.
Great, thank you. Hey everyone, this is Emil. So we're going to get started by just giving you a broad overview of what's happening on the state level with the Florida Coalition, and then zoom into Terri's work. And she'll talk for a while, and then we'll go back out to sort of summarize with some of the principles and ideas that underlie youth community organizing. So one principle, though, that feels really important to start with is this idea of wherever there's a problem, there are already people acting on the problem in some fashion. This quote directly is from the Allied Media Conference that happens in Detroit as one of their founding visions. And but what we know is that young people are engaged in their communities. They do care about issues that are impacting their lives and want adult support. So youth organizing is already happening, and we want to support that work and amplify it. Looking at youth victories overall, knowing that youth work is happening, this is a kind of a model of the socio-ecological model. So at the big outside purple circle, we can look at some of the teen victories that have happened in Florida. There's the Teen Dating Violence Statute, which Rose is going to go into more detail about. So a statute's been passed that covers teen dating violence, that implements that within schools on the statewide institutional level of organizing. On a community level, youth have led victories in school-wide enforcement of these policies and doing culture change within their schools so that healthy relationships are more of the culture in the school. They've started gay-straight alliances, leadership clubs, and other groups around healthy relationships. On a relationship level, young people are getting their peers involved. They're standing up to abusive behavior that they're seeing in their lives. And then on an individual level, we see change in personal behavior and beliefs. Rosa, are you ready to go over the Teen Dating Violence Statute?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So we wanted to go over our teen dating violence statutes here in Florida as a part of this webinar, and we'll just jump right in and get started. So in 2010, Florida passed legislation intended to promote youth education related to teen dating violence and support teen survivors of dating violence. Florida Statute 1006.148 mandates that each district school board must adopt and implement a teen dating violence and abuse policy, which must be integrated into each school district's discipline policies. Each school district must provide training for teachers, faculty, staff, and school administrators to implement the new dating violence and abuse policies. Florida Statute 1003.42 requires that a teen dating violence and abuse component must be added to the comprehensive health education curriculum for students in grades 7 through 12. The resource curricula was designed to address the core components required by the statute, which include the definition of dating violence and abuse, warning signs of dating violence and abusive behavior, characteristics of healthy relationships measured to prevent and stop dating violence, and community resources available to victims of dating violence and abuse. So the Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence, in partnership with our membership organizations, which are our 42 domestic violence centers throughout the state of Florida, and the Florida Department of Education, developed resource curricula, including supplementary material and training and teacher training, addressing teen dating violence for grades 7 through 12 to satisfy the requirements of the statute. Also, we created a model teen dating violence policy that school districts could use as a guide to build their own policies. And when we speak about the curricula, it must contain the components on the slide. And the teen dating violence prevention curricula was designed for educators to use in the classroom. Moving on. So this policy must be integrated into school discipline policies, like I stated before. And here are some components that it must address. And we have certain components in the teen dating violence model policy that we created to involve school resource officers and also community referrals. And all of the DV centers in Florida, the 42 centers, have a goal of really partnering with their school districts to enhance the teen dating violence policies. And of course, the highlight domestic violence center we have on today with Terri and Sunrise is actually moving towards a youth-led movement to push the teen dating violence policy to the forefront in Pasco County, which I'm so excited about this work that Terri's doing. And I'm so excited to see what happens with that, but it is youth-led and youth-driven. So we want to give this back over to Emil, because it looks like we're about to talk about our youth summit.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So it's the Youth Summit, so you had a bit of a slide configuration issue there. One of the things that we're doing on the statewide level every year is having a Youth Summit. And it's a statewide gathering for young people, both who are already involved in activism and leadership work around healthy and equitable relationships and ending dating violence, and those who are newer to that and just want to learn about it. So this year we're partnering with one of the Florida Certified Domestic Violence Centers to have it at a high school that they're working with regularly. And there's workshops for young people and for adults that come. Here you can see some pictures of past youth summits, youth presenting, also working on making maps and brainstorms of what are healthy relationships. And here's a flyer for an old one. And that's a way for young people to get involved and to meet each other. So there's a lot of work that happens county by county, and this way people can see what's going on across the state. The Florida Coalition also has a youth advisory board, and so that's young people that we work with to get input on our projects that we're doing and also to come up with their own projects. The toolkit that got mentioned earlier had a lot of young people involved in the designing of it and coming up with what would be useful to young people who want to do organizing. There's in-person meetings, and this is a statewide youth advisory board where people can gather and decide what they want to do. From that work has come our Be Courageous website. These are just a couple posters that young people came up with for that website and to put out into the community using their own messaging of what would be helpful for them to hear and for their friends to hear. In 2013, at the Youth Summit, there was an art contest around healthy relationships, and we created a universal peace calendar with the winning art. So you can see a picture of some of the art displayed there. We also, our Youth Advisory Board, thought it would be really cool to have a word search. So you can see that there's words relating to healthy relationships as a tool, the toolkit that I mentioned earlier again, and then the website, the Be Courageous website, are all of our different projects from our Youth Advisory Board. And the other thing that we do at the statewide level is support local youth work. So there's 42 certified domestic violence centers throughout the state, and we do what we can to help them strengthen their programs and do as much as possible in their local communities, because they're really there doing the day-to-day in-person work. So this is where Terri is going to take over and talk about some of the things that are happening in Pasco County.
Okay, great. Hi, this is Terri. I have been working with I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Delta Project, but that is a federal program that's funding through CDC, Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And I've actually been with the Delta Project here in Florida since its inception for us in 2003. So prevention is really important to me. So I'm going to, in our community, we had to identify a population that we wanted to work with through our CCR task force. I know those words are used interchangeably depending on your community. And our CCR wanted to work with youth, especially they were focused on school-based programs. At that point in time, we had a really good working relationship with our superintendent, approached him. He said, absolutely, we support you 100%. Let's move forward on this. What can we do? So that was interesting because then it's like we started looking at different prevention programs, and we all had to kind of step back and say, so how do we prevent violence, abusive behavior from happening in the first place? So the very first thing that we did is we approached a high-risk school program, and we used the Safe Dates curriculum, and we kind of did a healthy relationships class with those students. And it was very successful, but as we would wrap up and evaluate it and get feedback from the students, they kept telling us, you need to start younger. This is great, Miss O'Brien, but you need to be talking to these kids way back in elementary school. So we actually started looking at that idea. So we've talked about youth community action teams, so I'm just going to give you just a little bit of history about how we got to where we are today. So I'm going to talk about both school-based and community-based teams, and feel free to ask specific questions in the chat box as we go along if there's something you want me to talk a little bit more about. It's a little bit different doing a webinar because I don't have that interaction with the audience. We're one of those programs that we do both. We started out as a school-based program. So to date, we have fifth grade leadership program that we've developed. We do middle school clubs. We have a high school youth community action team, and then you're going to hear me talk about our Summer Youth Leadership Institute, which is, I think, pretty cool. So we started in the elementary schools after that feedback from the high school students, and anytime you have a champion, that always helps. And the importance of having it be youth-led and youth-initiated makes all the difference in the world. So at that point in time, I was a Girl Scout leader, and several of my girls were working on their Gold Awards. They were in high school. And one of the students wanted to start a cultural diversity club at her school where she had gone to elementary school because she felt that there were a lot of racial issues that were never discussed, etc. So we approached the school administrators with this particular student. Now, if I would have asked this, I'm not sure I could have ever gotten my foot in the door. But since she was a former student there and she already had great relationships with faculty there, they invited us to come in and have a conversation, and they supported the idea. So we started this fifth grade club and identified a group of students to begin to have conversations about diversity, inclusiveness. and what that would look like. So this next slide that I have was very, very helpful if you need tools to get your foot in the door at the school. Again, don't reinvent the wheel. We spent, I can't tell you how many months researching information, and it's already out there. And one of the best resources that I found is Nan Stein's, and I don't have the website that talks about the gender violence in elementary and secondary schools. I have it on my desk right now, but I neglected to put it in the slide. We can get that to you. But actually, all you have to do is Google that in a Google search, and the article will pop right up, and it's a step-by-step process. Gives you the words to say, to write up a request, to write up a proposal to present to your school to justify why you should be taking up school time to come in and do a program. I found it very helpful. It was a wonderful guide, and we use it to this day. So what we chose to do is work in a specific community, and we decided we wanted to work with feeder schools, schools that would connect to each other. So we would work with an elementary school that fed into a middle school that fed into a high school. And for our particular community, it was advantageous for us to choose a community that a higher than average poverty rate, and we used that by looking at the percentage of students that qualify for free reduced lunch. We know that that's an identified risk factor, so we use that as an opportunity to begin working with a certain community in working with the schools. So we collaborate with the school personnel, and this was really important because we have a tendency to think we know all the answers and want to come in and run programs our way. And if we do not collaborate with the school personnel and ask them, what do you need from us? How can we make this fit into what you're already doing? What happens is they shut us out and they don't invite you back. So this was something we spent a lot of time having conversations about. Another lessons learned, I don't know how it works in your district, but the word curriculum, we call that the C word, and we never use the C word anymore. We said that we had developed a curriculum, and when that information got back to our district office, that raised all kinds of alarms because they have a curriculum review committee that has a very rigorous vetting process that we had to put our materials through, and they said absolutely not, this is not evidence-based. It was evidence-informed, but they would only accept an evidence-based curriculum. So we no longer use that word. We've changed all our information, and we talk about educational/training materials. We talk about lesson plans. We personally do not use the word curriculum. That just caused too many barriers for us, and we're trying to keep things as simple as possible. So we used school personnel whenever we could. We got community support. We had youth volunteers working with us. We actually had students who were seniors in high school came in and helped to co-facilitate the elementary school program. It was skill-based, et cetera, and we chose to work with multiple sessions throughout the school year, which is a little bit unique for our program. Most programs that I've talked to, they kind of come in and they'll come in, you know, maybe every day for a week, or maybe once a week even for 4 weeks or 5 weeks, et cetera. We tried to set up a program that would be continuous throughout the entire school year so that we really had an opportunity to saturate the school community with messages. And that worked really well for us. So for our particular case, and there's different ways to do this, some groups we've done some groups that were gender exclusive. We've worked specifically with young girls. We've worked specifically with males. We try to, whenever possible, prefer to have a mixed group. That age group is what we work with. We focused on 10 to 18. And we really try to have a diverse group that has multiple cultural backgrounds, et cetera. which is sometimes a struggle because what oftentimes happens when you go to a school and say, I want to do a program, they either want to send you all their kids who have been in trouble as opposed to necessarily identifying their community leaders, or we get all the really good kids. And that's not what we were working for. We really wanted to try and have a mix of students. So with the elementary school, we ideally had a parent education component that worked really well. I will say that that's a lot more challenging to get parents involved when we're working with secondary schools, but it worked really well when we were doing with the fifth graders. So you've already seen the little social ecological model, and I have to tell you that having worked with CDC over the years, I know it's an inside joke, but I have definitely drunk the CDC Kool-Aid and have learned to really appreciate the importance of working at various levels. And I'll share with you some of the reasons why. Yes, we talk about theories, but it really, in all honesty, I didn't quite understand the process until we actually started doing the work. So I'll come back to that. So here was our overall goals, no matter what group we work with. We said, okay, there's the knowledge piece. We wanted to increase students' knowledge, okay, but we certainly wanted to reduce the number of students who enter in abusive dating relationships. That was important for a lot of groups, but that's a really difficult thing to measure because we did not want to use rates of reporting of abuse, et cetera, as a measurement of the effectiveness of our programs, because what we found is those really don't reflect the really what's happening in the school community oftentimes. But we did want to develop leadership skills, and what we found is that if we did not work with peers, students we were working with in the groups would tell us, you know, Miss O'Brien, I wear my shirt, you know, we have all these great conversations when I'm in the club, but when I go back and hang out with my friends, talk to my family, talk to my community, they laugh at me, they make fun of me, and they were not supported. So that was a real opportunity for us to really begin to talk about the importance of developing awareness events to educate the entire school community as often as possible. So knowledge was not enough. They needed to have the skills to move beyond that. And then one of the things we had to do was get the school personnel support. And there were a couple different things we did to do that. Is for the school to support our efforts, I made a point of going to some of the teachers when they would have their planning sessions, when they would have their meetings at the beginning of the school year, introduce myself, talked about what we were trying to do, et cetera, asked them for their feedback, that we really wanted their help. This was a collaboration. And they got really excited about it. And they would send me emails, and they would send me ideas and suggestions, and that was very helpful. The other thing that we did is the schools we were working with, we joined their school advisory councils. And I know every school in Florida is required to have that. I'm wondering if other districts, other states have that. If not, ask about it. It might be called something different. But school advisory councils are typically made up of your school administrators, teachers, faculty, parents, students, and community providers. So I joined as a community provider, and it gave us an opportunity to attend those meetings and get a better feel of what some of the issues were in the school. And then I was able to make connections to work that we were doing with our violence prevention clubs with some of the things that were happening at the school. So, and again, at that community level, working to get support from the community. For us, that support involved working with our school district. What we found is we started working with individual schools, but then the school district, if they did not support it, if we left them in the dark, they kind of balked and said, we don't know what you're doing, who are you, why are you here? That in order to get the support from the individual schools, we had to have the support from the school district. So that was another lesson learned in order to do that. And the community support, I'm going to talk with you a little bit more about that when we start talking about some of our youth community action team programs. But also when we talk about community support and community connectedness, those are also identified protective factors. And when we start thinking about language, when I have conversations with folks within the school system, talking about protective factors is important language to have, because those are key words that they will cue into, that they will support also at their level. So when you're working with students, and it looks like about half of you are already working with youth, some of you may be planning to begin starting some type of a youth program. One of the things you need to think about is what type of adult youth leadership you want to have. Adult-centered, that's where you have your classrooms, where your teacher comes in, they plan the curriculum, they do everything. And I would say when we first started, that's kind of what we did. We put the materials together, we presented it. And based on feedback from the students, we very quickly moved towards adult-led collaboration, where students would give us feedback. And we still do that in the 5th grade level and some in the middle school, but by the time we get to the high school, we're really focused on youth-led collaborations. So just to kind of share with you just a little bit, I just wanted to share with you our 5th grade leadership program. They were just the coolest little kids. They had such a good time. They were a pleasure to work with. If I could work with elementary school kids all the time, I would definitely do that. Those are just some of the things that we talked about. If anybody wants more information or would like to look at the lesson plans that we put together, contact me. I'm more than happy to share those with you. Everything that we've developed and put together, it's with the expectation that CDC wants us to share that with other programs so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And our group of students wanted to put together a pledge, and this was the pledge that they did, their words. So we had little shirts made up, and they had their pledge on their shirts. They were very proud to wear them. And I just wanted to share with you a couple of the comments that the students had made. I love working with 5th graders. That last one that says, "Dear Sunrise, thank you guys. Before I was mean, I kind of am, but not like I was before." You know, talk about honesty. I thought that was great. One of the other comments that they made was the last one that says, "Thank you for changing my attitude." Well, you did a little bit. That's okay. I'll take it. You know, change is gradual. We're not going to make huge changes overnight. And then there was a comment about the skin color, and that was interesting because the administration, when we said that we like to have a conversation around racism, at first they were like, "Oh, you know, we can't talk about that in elementary school. That's too complex for students." And what we found is by the time students are in elementary school, they have an understanding, they have experienced oftentimes what privilege means. They just don't have any language for it. So what we did is give them language so that they could continue to have those conversations. The other thing that I wanted to share is we did reports at the end of the year that we sent to the school, and I can't emphasize how important that is because that's how we started our middle school clubs. 5th graders said, "Wow, we want to do this in middle school." So we contacted the middle school, and we began to also start a club there. Now, our school clubs, there's different ways to run them. Some schools actually have designated club days. Other schools don't. And if they don't have designated club days, what we do is our students meet once a month, and we rotate class periods, and they are excused from class for that period. But again, we rotate them. So throughout the school year, they would only miss a class, not more than 2 times. That way we get support from the teachers. Of course, that means we have to make sure we have attendance, that we coordinate that. Teachers always get the last say, and we always support that. But that's how we started with our middle school clubs. And when we get into middle school, that's when we started having conversations about respect, healthy communication, leading into conversations about consent and coercion. And the leadership part was we did a lot of individual work with the students where we might have a topic that we were going to talk about that day, but we broke into breakout sessions, and each table had a designated leader for the day who was responsible for facilitating the conversation. Someone else at the table would take notes, and then at the end of the conversation, they stood up and reported out to the whole group. And I have to say the teachers loved that because they saw students standing up and talking in front of a room full of people that had never done that before. And so they really felt that that was a very positive leadership quality that they supported. So in our middle school clubs, they also have a pledge that they wrote, and in order to have some continuity of messaging, all of our middle school clubs have the same pledge. However, each school does their own branding. So just for example, Pasco Middle School, they're the Pirates of Peace. They are the Pirates of Peace Club, and you can kind of see they design their own shirts, and that's what those look like. One of our other schools is called, they're the Cyclones, Centennial Cyclones, and they named themselves the Cyclones Peace Zone Club. So, because one of the things that we began to do is bring students together. We do a training day with our students. The first year we did the clubs, we found if we only see them once class period, once a month, it literally takes all year before they begin to finally figure out what it is that we're trying to do. So we tried something different, and we asked the administrators if we could actually pull the students from class for one day, and we do a full day of training. Some of the schools we do it off-site, other schools we do it on-site depending on their availability for room. And these are just some examples of pulling the students together. You'll see in the background the school resource officer. Sometimes at some of our schools, that's our club sponsor. Sometimes they're the guidance counselors. You can see in the bottom picture an example of students working at their individual tables and standing up and reporting out what the whatever conclusions that their group came up with at the end of the conversation. The other thing we did is make a really big deal out of the 8th graders that were graduating. They have their own little ceremony. They got certificates. We recognized them. We'd have the administrators come and make a big deal, take their pictures, send them out to the press, etc., so that they would hopefully want to continue their participation into high school. And again, this was student-driven, as the students said, wow, this is something that we really want to do when we get to the high school level. We want to continue this relationship. So we started our first, this is what we actually called our Youth Community Action Team. We felt this was a great opportunity to channel students' already righteous indignation. They're always, I remember when I was in high school, it's like I just looked for something to rebel against. So we started our violence prevention clubs. So the exciting thing for us is this was student-driven, and one of the high school students that worked with us to start this club is her senior project is actually sitting right next to me. Her name is Morgan, and she worked with our very first Youth Community Action Team, went on to college, came to work at Sunrise part-time on our Prevention Action Team. When she graduated, worked full-time over in our Shelter in the Children's program, and now is back in our prevention program first time. So we're really excited about that growth in leadership. And since we've started our Youth Community Action Teams, we've actually hired 3 of the high school students that were in our Youth Community Action Teams that are now on staff. So yes, that's pretty exciting. So our Youth Community Action Team, let's see what we have here, began as a school-based club, but then at the end of the year, the students said, well, can we meet over the summer? Again, it was their initiative, and we said, yeah, sure, we could meet at Sunrise. So we invited them to come there, and they started bringing their friends. So it began to expand to other programs. Then what happened in the fall, the students we had some scheduling issues at the high school level. We have found that there were lots of obstacles at the high school level having a club founded at the school. So when there was some delay in getting the club started at the school, the students said, well, why don't we just meet after school and we'll continue to meet at sunrise. And so we did. The students, they designed their own brand. Their brand is Know Your Piece. That's what they came up with. We worked with a website design company who had several meetings with the students to talk about what is their message, how can we make it look pretty, how can we make it look attractive. So that's kind of our branding that we put on our materials and et cetera. And so every time we're out in the community, it's a conversation revolves around know your piece, what is your piece? And it's focused on taking action. We do have a Know Your Piece website that you're more than welcome to look at. This is the materials that the students designed. They really did a great job on that. Okay, so some of the things that we did were opportunities to educate the school community. And I'll just very quickly share with you some of the things that we did that were really successful in an effort to saturate messages throughout the school year. Valentine's Day is a great time, besides being Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. Students wanted to they created posters, et cetera, throughout the school. School supported that. They thought it was a great idea, did a display in the media center. Media specialists, they loved that the students were getting involved, engaged in it. We did things on the morning news show at the school. We actually even got the teachers involved. They got real excited, and a group of teachers got together and sang Aretha Franklin's Respect on the morning news show and had kids get up and dance in the classrooms. They asked students to sign pledges of peace, and we stapled them together in rings and hung them all around the school. It was great. One thing we did learn, anytime we do any kind of visuals, is that you only want to keep them up not longer than 30 days. All the media training that we've had is after about 30 days, kids stop looking at them. They become invisible. So if you're going to do things like that, you need to update your material on a regular basis. So as not to disrupt classroom time, we've gotten really creative and we do lots of things on the school campus during lunchtime. Compliment campaigns, those have been very popular. Again, the faculty has supported that. Those are some examples of some where students, we would go right into the cafeteria and talk to students, and they would come up and they would give campaigns and shout outs and recognize other people. We've also worked with the schools to do mix-it-up lunches. Those were very popular. The schools wanted to do some of their own campaigns. They looked at lots of different different posters and said, yeah, okay, we like the message, but we don't like the pictures on them. We'd rather have pictures of ourselves. So they got really creative, took pictures of themselves, created their own campaigns and posters that they would put up, and it got to be kind of a cool thing at the school because they would change out the pictures and students would go by and they wanted to say, ooh, whose picture is up there this month? So that was a great way to keep students coming back and looking and seeing the message over and over again, but with different faces. So that was part of a project that we did with the students in regards to challenging the media and the media messages. They wanted to do their own. Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, again, that's a great opportunity to do displays over in the cafeteria. We've done them in the halls, and we found it better to do it at the cafeteria where we can engage in conversations with students. We have this really cool wheel where the students can come up and spin the wheel, and we ask them a question. The first time we did it, we were the facilitators. After that, we trained students to do that. They facilitated it so that with students asking questions of other students, and those questions initially were knowledge-based, where we would ask them, is pushing abuse? And they would say yes or no. Well, we switched those to more action-based as we wanted to get more and more students involved in actually doing something. So we would ask questions like, okay, you're walking down the hall, you see a student push another student, what do you do? What kind of action would you take? And then there would be a conversation, and if there were other students standing around, we would kind of engage them like a group conversation. So that's worked really well. We've done all kinds of pledges. There's lots of materials out there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Some of you may have known Ben Atherton. We have certainly brought him in whenever, every now and then we have little pots of money, or we've gotten the community to support that, where we can do an entire school-wide presentation. But we will only do that in a school where we've been working with, and this is kind of like a culmination to bring everything together. Because, again, those one-time messages are just not as productive. We did this with our one of our school clubs, and we did 2 sessions so that all the students got to go through it, and then Ben came back at night and did another session so that the parents could come and hear the messaging that we were doing with the students, with the hopes that they will go back and continue those conversations in their community. One thing we did learn, though, is we also worked with one of our universities. We brought Ben Atherton in, and they wanted all their athletes to come in and hear this message. And so they were mandated to come. The students were not thrilled about having to be there. The coaches came, signed the kids in to make sure they were there, and then they left, which was interesting. I tried to say, aren't you staying for it? No, we don't need this. So again, that's another lessons learned, that if you're going to do something like this, to really think it through and plan it ahead of time and make sure you have engagement at all those different levels, because to just have the students be there and it's not being reinforced by their leaders, who are the coaches, teachers, etc., I question how effective that was, and that was just a missed opportunity. I know I'm talking a lot, so Morgan's here checking the chat box. So feel free, if you have questions, to stop and ask me along the way, and she will stop and go with that. So another thing we did, again, we kept focusing on community support in our city, that we did a proclamation. And our city meets at night, and they wanted to honor the work that our youth were doing. So we sent a message out to all the students and to their parents. And we had about 25 students and parents, family members show up to get this proclamation. It was standing room only. The city was so excited that all these parents and students, and they were so impressed by that now they began to offer other kinds of support. What can we help you do? Is there money that we can do? So that recognition was really important for the students to feel like their voices were really heard, and also to get some financial support from the community. So, recruiting challenges. So now I'm going to talk some more about I'm going to move into our non-school related youth community action teams, because all of ours is now non-school related. We are not doing a youth community action team at the high school level that's school-based anymore, and I'll tell you why. So this is kind of a flyer that the students designed, that they put together. Keep in mind, when you have it's not a school-based program, there are pros and cons. The benefits are that we can talk about almost anything we want to, whereas conversations within the school were somewhat limited based on the whatever the content was. There were certain conversations that it just was not appropriate for us to have in a school setting, but we could have that afterwards. All of our students do get parent permission forms as part of their volunteer application to be part of the Youth Community Action Team. That's, again, something we can send to you if you want to see what ours looks like. We're more than happy to share with that. It also contains a media release, because we take lots of pictures that we send out to the media, send to the school district on a regular basis, so that the students can get recognized for the work that they're doing. One of the obstacles, obviously, is transportation. Not all students have transportation, so that can be limiting. So again, there are pros and cons. We try to, on a monthly basis, have our Youth Community Action Team meet somewhere else in the community on a Saturday. We use Panera sometimes, and there's a whole different group of students oftentimes that are able to come to that wouldn't necessarily be able to come to our after-school program. But here's an interesting thing that we found out, is when we start talking about recruiting expansion, our YCAT have gotten so close and bonded with each other that when we started talking about recruiting outside other people, they kind of saw them as outsiders, and there was this little bit of reluctance and hesitancy to bring new people in. So that was something we really had to look at and address and overcome. And this is kind of a picture of our YCAT meetings, and there's, I think, is this the one that you went to, Rose? I'm not sure. Anyway, our YCAT oftentimes will meet with community leaders. We've had the Florida Coalition come down and do a site visit and meet with our Youth Community Action Team. Most recently, we're working with our school district, and we have had them come and meet with our Youth Community Action Team to talk about implementation of that teen dating violence bill and what that would look like.
Hi, Terri. I'm sorry, that was me in the picture. I just wanted to answer your question.
I thought that was you. Okay.
Yeah, that was me with the big
hair.
That
was a great opportunity for them to feel like, wow, people are really listening to their messages and their feedback and what they had to say, and I was very proud of them. They all dressed nice and professionally that day, and they all practiced kind of what they wanted to say ahead of time. You know, we gave them the opportunity to brainstorm what are the messages you want to get across to folks, and they came in really well prepared.
It was a good day.
With their comments and questions and ideas. So I forgot to put a sample agenda. My bad. If that's something that you're interested, I can send that to you. But typically when we meet with the students, we have an opportunity where them to kind of touch base, get to know each other. We always have snacks. Food's important. And then we typically have a conversation about current events. They really are interested in what's happening in their world around them. So sometimes we will bring up something that's happened in the news. Sometimes they will bring up something that's happened in the news. We encourage them to do it. If they bring in something, we'll put ours on the back table and focus on what they've brought also. So we have lots of discussions about what's happening politically, what's happening currently around issues of violence prevention, leadership, et cetera. And really having critical conversations about challenging, again, media messaging, et cetera. What type of action would they like to take to address those issues? Okay. Some of the other activities that we have done, some of these we've done school-based, some of these we have done in the community. The way we work with our Youth Community Action Team now, once they've been trained to become leaders, they now go back to their schools and start their own programs. So we provide support. We may come to their meetings from time to time, but we're no longer going into the school and running those meetings. That for two reasons. Number one, we don't have enough staff to support all the different schools, and we wanted there to be some sustainability that if our prevention money dollars dry up, those programs will continue to happen. And again, when they're youth-led programs, they're supported by the schools more than they are if it's us coming in and running the program. That makes sense. So the chalk art was a really easy thing to do. We identified a peace day. Students got permission from their administrators to do that. They put together some designs for the folks that are not as artistic as others. We kind of created some stencils that they could put together, very positive messaging, et cetera. Got all the messages pre-approved, and then got the chalk, which is really cheap, and all over the school campus did chalk art. So every single student on campus, there is no way you could have walked through campus and not seen these messages. So again, it's not, you don't want to do a one-time thing, but we kind of planned things throughout the year, and this was one of them to reinforce those messages in a little bit different way that was really supported by the students, and it gave us a chance to collaborate with some other clubs. There was an art club on campus. They loved this idea. They really got into it and collaborated with the Youth Community Action Team to do that. Some of the other things that we've done, Day of Silence, that's a great thing to do. However, I will tell you that requires, certainly you want to make sure you have administrative and staff support to do that, because you know, we're talking about LGBTQ issues, and is every school ready to have that conversation? It can be a little bit challenging, so it's not something I would recommend you do as the first time you implement a program in a school. That's something I think you need to kind of build up to make sure that your students and your school are ready to have those conversations. But it was very well accepted by the schools that we did it with. Some of the other things that we have done to get the students involved in community programs is Pasco County Fair is a big deal here. County fairs, we're in a rural community, and we booked a table at the Pasco County Fair, and students volunteered to man the tables and gave out just hundreds and hundreds of pieces of literature, conversations, et cetera, with all people from all over the community that came for that. And it was a great opportunity for them to build their self-esteem and to develop their leadership skills and to have conversations with people that they've never met, that they don't know anything about. We've done walk a mile in your shoes. I'm just curious, this would be a good time to do a raise your hand question. Have any of you ever done a walk a mile in her shoes program in your community? Question? I don't know. Oh, a few people have. Okay. If that's something you have never done, it's such a fun way to get your community involved. It's typically something that the men in your community do, and they wear women's shoes, etc. And our Youth Community Action Team sponsored an event and did that. We tagged along with another event. They were doing a parade one year, and we did a walk a mile in your shoes in the parade, and we had the men leading the way in the parade, and then we had all the students from our Youth Community Action Team parading behind them, you know, with different signs that said, we are the next generation, we are the voice that will continue this message, et cetera. It was very well received in our community. The students really enjoyed it, and it was fun. This work is really hard. It can be really intense, and I think it's important that every now and then we kind of lighten up our message a little bit and also realize that this work can be fun to do. Let's see, what else have we done? We've done several different activities with our local Girl Scout troops. We do this event called Day of the Girl, where we work with younger Girl Scouts, and we have our Youth Community Action Team come and help to facilitate that with us. We've done lots of different community events, again, where we use the wheel and where the youth show up, and they love doing those. And they have an opportunity to have conversations with people in the community, ask them questions, et cetera, about their thoughts and ideas about violence prevention, with the hope that their goal is that for folks to understand that violence is an issue in our community, that it is preventable, and yet everybody has a role to play, and what is their piece? There's that know your piece part. Okay, so that's just one of the comments from our Youth Community Action Team members, you know, about how important it is. So many of our students that have gone through our Youth Community Action Team have gone on and are in college now and are doing phenomenal things on their own. And whenever they're back in town, they will touch base with us, et cetera. We try and keep up with them about what they're doing. Okay, so I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about evaluation. Again, I think that at some point we began to really look at, okay, how successful is this? What are we accomplishing? So we did work with our evaluators, and it's a Delta program. We are very lucky to work with phenomenal empowerment evaluators to help us in this process. So we worked with them to develop an evaluation tool, and these are just a couple of the questions. I just wanted to show you that once we've been working with students for a while, we ask some of these questions because, again, these are leadership skills that we're focusing on, that we work to develop with them. And there's Just a couple more of them. We want to make sure, do they understand what Sunrise is? Do they support the work that they do? Can they explain the mission of the Youth Community Action Team program? And these are really important skills because they then take these skills and they can put them on their resumes, they can refer to them on their college applications, etc. We give letters of recommendations for the students besides giving them, in our state of Florida, we have Bright Future Scholarship. And they need to earn community service hours if they're going to be going to college, etc. So we work with the students to help them design the agendas for the different meetings, etc. So we might start doing it, but then we kind of pull back and let them do it. Our next step is once they evaluate themselves, then we have them come in one-on-one and meet with our staff, and we have a conversation about our observations in regards to their skills. And sometimes we push them a little bit, as we get to know the students. Some of them are like, oh, no, I can't do that. I can't talk to a group. And, I might say, I really think that you can. Let's schedule something where we co-facilitate together. You can just kind of be there and shadow me, and I might turn to you and ask you some questions. And then the next time, though, I'll ask you to step in and do part of the presentation, have part of the conversation, and slowly work them into it. Other students just jump right in, and they're like a pro having the conversations. But that last one, number 24, is working with them to develop, we call it their elevator speech. Can they clearly, succinctly explain to somebody what our purpose is? And of course that means they have to be clear and understand. They have to have internalized the whole process before they can explain it to somebody else. So the next thing that we did is we developed our Summer Youth Leadership Institute. And big shout out to Alaska. Several years ago, they came and presented in Florida at one of our prevention conferences, and they do an institute. And I thought that was the most exciting thing, to have the opportunity to bring students together and live with them for a couple days and do this very intense training. And it took a couple years to develop, but we eventually finally had the ability to do that. And we ended up collaborating with one of our local universities who let us use the dorms. So the first year we did it, it was 4 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then it has since expanded to 5 days because the students said, 5 days isn't enough. So the Florida Coalition supports this, and we get the school district also does a fundraiser every year now to provide scholarships for this. But collaborating with the university, all basically they're charging us for is room and board. We can do a whole week with these students, and it costs like $250 per student. But the school district makes sure there's money available. We've never turned a student away because they can't afford to pay for it. So we get lots of support from local businesses in addition to that. And again, this is where we're now moving towards our youth-led collaborations, because by the time we did this the second year, that's one of our lovely group of students that we did, and they came back as our facilitators the second year. So again, those that graduated the first year, we started planning with them and to co-facilitate the sessions. So you can see we're kind of maybe more in the background. The students are up there actually facilitating the sessions. They absolutely do a great job. At the end of the day, yes, question. Which one? National? Oh, let's see. Okay. Sorry. Okay, I was looking at one of the questions. Okay, so I know, again, I'm going fast because I want to have time for questions, but having the student facilitators was just a phenomenal idea. It also gives us a respite. Get tired of doing all the talking. But the other thing we did is bring in outside speakers because, again, we're really focusing on youth adult allies. So bringing in different leaders to do that, we felt really important for them to have those conversations. To build capacity within the state of Florida, we also invited other centers, and these are some of the staff from one of the other centers that has a youth community action team, came and lived at the dorm and hung out and stayed with us for a week so that they could in turn develop their own program, but they kind of wanted to see what it was like. They had a great time. Again, just one of the quick exercises that we did develop their elevator speeches. We called it 1 Minute Please winners, and they competed against each other, and we added a little funny part to it. You know, give us your elevator speech as if you were underwater. It took the nervousness off, kind of made it funny, etc. They really kind of stepped outside of their shells, and even the quiet, kind of shy students really got into the activity and did a great job, very creatively talking about how can you give your message in a different way to people, to your friends and folks out in the community. Now, the other part that we did is each group of students, and we tried to recruit students from different schools. Every night they would kind of work on their school plan. They would get together in their own school groups. We had 5 different schools attending, high schools, and they would come up with a plan. And on the last day, they presented their plan to the community. And this is one of the groups from one of the high school students, and you can kind of see they've got their board all put together. Here's the thing that they want to do at their school. So we call it a symposium. On the last day, we had a graduation and made a big deal out of it, and we invited faculty from St. Leo since they were our sponsors. We invited parents to come. We invited community leaders to come. We invited folks from the school district to come and see the students graduate, get their certificates. We made these really cool little certificates for them. That's a little wordle that they made up. And they actually had conversations with the community leaders. And as the community leaders would come in, we would encourage them to say, grab a student, have them walk the wall. You can see in the background there's the wall, and there's all kinds of posters, flyers, etc. We actually used this room, and every day as we worked on different activities, different conversations, they would write things up, and we would post them with easel pad around the room. So as folks came in, they would walk the wall, which means they would take these community leaders, parents, family members, and walk them around the room and talk about all the different initiatives that they've done, the things that they have learned, et cetera, throughout the week. And the community leaders were so impressed. The one is Dr. Lee. She actually runs our MSW program at St. Leo, and she says, I'm going to invite these students to come in to my master's level classes and teach a session on intersectionality because I think they can do a better job than we can. So, again, we do every opportunity we can to work with social media. We put public service announcements together, et cetera. We send them out to the community. We send them out to the individual organizations. We send them out to the school district with pictures, et cetera. And it really does pay off. We got last year an award from WEGU, which is our local nonprofit station in the community, got a lot of recognition for that. We previously got an award for them for our middle school club, but this year we got an award for them for our youth community action team. So again, we keep evaluating, is this working? Are we effective? Are we meeting our goals, et cetera? As the students begin to plan different activities, we keep going back to our evaluation. Okay, what is the purposes? What are we trying to reach? What is our end goal? So that getting them into the habit of evaluating also. Those of you that are working with youth, if you are not already evaluating your programs, I would really encourage you to think about doing that. And I know that there are some wonderful evaluators. We could actually do a whole webinar on how do you evaluate the effectiveness of the work that you're doing with youth. I know we've done lots of creative things to evaluate the work that we're doing in an effort to continue to get additional funding, et cetera, to expand our programs. So why are we doing this? You know, when we started out, we did the programs, and what we found is youth said, yeah, no, that's not what we want to hear. The conversation we're currently having with our school district, they have this whole training that the administrators put together to train the faculty on the teen dating violence bill, on bullying, et cetera. We showed it to the students who said, yeah, no, we need to redo this, so they're now working with our school district to redo that whole training process. So the fact that they actually listen to the students just feel that they're valued, their opinions are valued. Right now we're doing something with the school district for Respect Week, which is we've got set for next week. This is a school-wide initiative. Instead of just working with one school, we're partnering with the school district who is channeling all this information to all the high schools in Pasco County. That's the first time we've done this on a district-wide level, so we're really excited about that. And we'll see how that turns out. But we're very hopeful. They put a lot of planning into it, and the students are really excited about it. So our next steps is we're looking for some funding where we can actually pay stipend for some of these students who are on our youth community action team to actually come into the office and work on some of their projects. They work really hard. They deserve to get paid for the work that we're doing. We continue to look for opportunities for them to speak. Every year we do a summit within our school district. Members of our youth community action team actually came and co-presented at that summit with us last year. The district had them get up on stage and give their 1-minute elevator speech and recognize them. It was a phenomenal experience for them. And we're, again, using their voices to really critique some of the school's policies and the way that they are addressing some of these issues. So that's
Great.
the end of my part.
Thank you, Terri. That was
I breath now.
That was so much, and it was really awesome. This is Emil again with the Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And people are welcome to chat in the chat box any questions you had for Terri or for us. But I just wanted to sort of highlight some of the examples that Terri gave and give some principles that hopefully people can use in your own communities. So, you know, Terri talked a lot about why youth mobilizing is important and why it's effective. And just one piece of information I wanted to add to that is that teens are already turning to each other and supporting each other. According to one research project, if in an abusive relationship, 73% of teens said they would turn to a friend for help. So when we're supporting teenagers in skills around healthy relationships, they're able to better support each other in that. We're also supporting current and future leadership of prevention efforts. So we want to make sure we're clear that it's current leadership as well as hiring people in the future, ongoing generations, having intergenerational ideas and input when we're trying to end domestic violence is so important and so fun and exciting, like Terri mentioned. So some of the key ideas behind mobilizing youth, we have sort of these ABCs that we'll look at quickly. The A is ask, believe, and then create. So when you're asking, it's really having genuine, honest conversations with young people. What would you like to do? What are your interests? What do you want the purpose of this to be? How can you make a difference? How are you already making a difference? Terri gave us some examples of changing their programs based on being able to listen to young people and what they wanted. Saying, we want to meet in the summer. We'll meet after school. We want to keep doing this in middle school and then in high school. So really asking those questions and opening that conversation and then listening to and believing the results. And here it's that transition between us coming in as adults with a specific program for young people to coming in with our experience but sharing that in a way where we both mutually learn and benefit. You can set realistic short-term steps as well as have a long-term goal. And really having faith. We get taught a lot of messages that young people, are not leaders or just like negative messages about youth. So being able to check ourselves on those and have faith that young people are awesome. And then create. So supporting the students and the youth creativity, brainstorming and incorporating ideas, allowing teams to inspire and motivate each other, and really learn about youth-led organizations that are happening all over the place and use those as inspiration as models. These are just some of the reminders of, when people are young, you hear a lot of things that are negative. And so to remember what it was like to be a teenager and hear this negative stuff all the time, and we want to make sure we're not replicating that when we're being adult allies. Okay, we've covered a lot of this youth leadership stuff, so I want to make sure we get to what are some of the additional ideas to promote youth leaders. And Terri, again, gave specific examples, so this is stuff that maybe would work in your communities. Convening local leadership to support youth leadership efforts, training local leaders on adultism and the importance of engaging youth as leaders, and having a plan and structure for how you're going to engage youth leaders. So, working with young people, it's also about working with the other adults in their lives to understand adultism, to understand really valuing youth leadership. And that's another important piece that you can be doing in your communities. So when you have staff that are working with youth, you want to make sure those staff have the ability to build trusting relationships, are respectful of young people, and really see youth as partners in prevention. You also want to be creative and think outside of the box. There's a lot of valuable lessons that Terri shared, like not using the word curriculum when you're working with schools, or moving, their visuals from the hallway into the cafeteria. Just figuring out solutions to problems as they come up can be really important. And again, you want to be building youth power. It's not just about raising youth self-esteem, but it's about youth being leaders and having power and control over their lives and their communities. That means that we as adults need to be honest about power and oppression, about our privilege as adults. We need to learn about the historical contributions of youth and incorporate all of that into the community work that we're doing. So I want to pause for a second, and more slides I can go over, but see if there are questions. I know we have 10 minutes left.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Terri for her great presentation too, and Morgan, who I know is sitting there next to her. Emil, I so appreciate these things that these points that you're making. And yeah, this is Casey, so I would encourage people, if you have questions or comments, to please share them in the chat now. Emil, are you reaching the end of your presentation?
Yeah, I can pause there because I think we've covered everything that's on the remainder slides, and they'll be available, for people to look at on their own later.
Okay, so, and I'm not in any way trying to rush you. I just am realizing that Morgan, who's a youth activist who's sitting next to Terri, has offered that she can share her reflections in being part of the program. So I wonder if we might pause and take a moment to allow Morgan to speak.
That would be awesome.
And in
All
the
right,
meantime,
here she is.
Great. Thanks, Morgan. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. This is a reflection on someone who was starting their own youth community action team as a teenager and then now doing the work as an adult. It's very important to build that relationship with the teenagers, basically as a support and as an advocate for them to the different institutions that they're working in, whether that be to leaders in the community or even in the schools, especially because majority of the time it's hard for the students to navigate those institutions of who they need to talk to and kind of going through the tape to be able to do those community awareness events or even do awareness in their schools. It's difficult, especially when they have to go to class all the time or just like I said before, even knowing who to talk to, because there's different positions in the school and different teachers have different responsibilities, so it's knowing who to talk to. And that definitely is a place to start as some of the adults who work with them, is to kind of help them cut through that tape. Another thing is definitely listen to them, because they have their own ideas, like Emil was talking about before, is allow them to be creative and allow them to kind of do their own lessons learned, like allow them to be able to make those mistakes so that they can better learn from those experiences and be better able to do better awareness work in the terms of IPV and teen dating violence.
This is Terri. Just want to respond real quick to Rebecca's question about the whole drama thing, and yes. One of the ways I think that we address that, because that's always part of the issue, is the drama, is we're constantly having conversations about respectful behavior with other people. So even when we are challenging media messages, even when we're talking about current events, et cetera, we keep going back to our basic rules of, yes, but how do you challenge this respectfully? How do you have this conversation? How do you disagree with somebody in a respectful tone? So that's constantly the focus, is that respectful behavior, respectful communication, no matter what the relationship is, if that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Terri. I think that's a very helpful response. And Morgan, it's so wonderful to hear your feedback and input on, working with youth activists as we go forward. Emil, I don't know if you had more that you wanted to say before we wrap up today. I'm not seeing other questions coming through. Oh, I see Rebecca asking, do you have youth help craft that language too around scripts for PSAs and things like that?
Yes, we do all the time. They're working on one today. They're putting a video together, and that we'll be posting on our website, et cetera, around Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. So, yes, we try to use their words, and if they're having a conversation with like somebody from the school district or principal, we may help tweak the language a little bit so they're using some of the buzzwords that we know administrators want to hear. But that's all part of teaching them how to have conversations with the adult leaders in their lives.
Great, thank you. So let me ask, I'm going to ask each of the presenters if you have any closing thoughts to offer before I close out today's webinar. So Terri and Morgan, if we could start with you.
Working with youth, to me, it's why I get up in the morning and come to work. It's so much fun. They are the light in my life. Even though I'm the older one on the team, I'm kind of like the mother one. They like working with the younger folks like Morgan. They prefer, but that's okay. I just love working with them, and I feel like I have a lot to offer them as being a mentor, and that's been very positive for me.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. Morgan?
And it's definitely refreshing to see what the new things that they're doing and some of the new ideas that they bring. Every new year, new YCAT members come on, and we keep some of the ones from years before. It's definitely a pleasure to see what they want to do and some of the things that they're very passionate about, and see that empowerment and personal growth within them.
Great. Wonderful, thanks. Rosa, did you have any final thoughts to share?
Yeah, I wanted to thank you all for the opportunity so that we can have a national dialogue about our programs here in Florida. We are doing great work here, and I just appreciate the opportunity so that we can get other states hearing what we do so well here in Florida, especially Terri, your site is awesome. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Great, thank you, Rosa. Emil?
Yeah, thank you. Also, I just want to echo that sentiment that working with young people is so inspiring and important and valuable. And I think I am constantly learning and growing and, living my life and doing my work better because of getting to work with young people. So that's something that I love about and encourage everybody to be open to that level of like learning when you're working with youth.
Thank you so much. I do want to say, I want to thank all of our presenters for sharing so openly today, such helpful tips to all of us who are doing this work in partnership with youth. And so I want to welcome all of you to please join us for our next webinar in our Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month series, which will focus on our gender revolution, youth leaders in action. On this webinar, which will happen next Thursday at the same time, presenters from the Idaho Coalition will highlight their brand new 2017 We Choose All of Us campaign for TDVAM that directly addresses the current climate of hate and violence in our schools and communities as a model for promoting youth-driven activism for social transformation. So let's continue this conversation. Please join us on Facebook and on Twitter, and we'll keep the conversation going all throughout this month of February with a focus on youth activism and youth leadership in our movement. And again, we would encourage you to respond to our brief feedback survey upon logging out of the session today. That really helps to make sure we keep our programming relevant to you and the work that you're doing in the field. So thanks again to all of you for your participation, and I hope you have a great afternoon. Thanks again to our presenters. Bye-bye.